G'day everyone and welcome to Inside Rugby with Mark. My name's Mark and I'm a Kiwi rugby fan living here in beautiful Cancun in Mexico. Now we're between rounds at the moment in the Six Nations competition for 2024, so I thought this week I'd make a couple of videos looking at each of the team's performances so far after round 2 of the competition. Yesterday I looked at Wales, Italy and France, and today I'm going to be looking at Scotland, England and Ireland and see how they've been travelling so far in this year's tournament. So let's get into the video. Get into it, and before I do, if you enjoy my content, why not hit the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up and come along the journey with us here on Inside Rugby. So we've got lots more than the Six Nations happening this year. Of course, there's going to be some super rugby coverage here. I'm going to be looking at some of those games and also all of the international tests that are going to be played this year. I'm going to give my previews and reviews of those games, so plenty to check out here on Inside Rugby. Now the top 3 teams so far in the Six Nations, Scotland, England and Ireland, all been playing relatively well. I'm going to go through that right now and we'll talk about it. And let's have a look at the table first of all as it stands after 2 rounds of this year's competition. We have Scotland in 3rd place on 5 points. We have England in 2nd place on 8 points, and we have Ireland out there in the front on 10 points. And well deserved as well from an Irish perspective. I'll talk more about them in this video as we get through these 3 teams. But we're going to start off looking at Scotland today. And of course, Scotland came up against Wales in Cardiff at the Principality Stadium in their first game in this year's Six Nations competition. And boy, what a thriller it was, remembering Scotland had not won in Cardiff for 22 years. So there was a lot on the line, and Gregor Townsend thought this was probably the best opportunity that Scotland were going to have in Cardiff for a long time, because they were coming up against a fairly young and inexperienced Welsh team, to say the least. On the other hand, Warren Gatland was looking for a good performance from his young crew, giving them a bit of a break into international rugby in a number of positions. So the Six Nations this year for Scotland got off to a very good start indeed in that first half in Cardiff, and they really raced away with it, playing some very good controlled rugby, I would say. And it was that man Finn Russell from number 10 that was really doing fantastic things around game management for this particular game. He had the Welsh defence all in 9s and 10s because they didn't know what he was going to do next. His kicking was very good. He did a couple of great 50-22s in this game. And he also led his backline away on different occasions, and we saw Hugh Jones and Simone Tupolotto in particular doing some great breaks in the midfield. But it was that man Duhan van der Merwe out on the wing that was going to have a very special game in this game against Wales, and it was of course the team that Duhan van der Merwe had not scored against in the Six Nations thus far coming into this particular game. Look, I thought Scotland did really well in that first half, and standouts for me were Zander Fagerson did really well. George Turner was playing well. I think he went off the field and came back on with an HIA situation there for a while. But it was Gray and Cummings that really ignited the Scottish forwards in that first half, and they got plenty of ball from set piece. They were very good. They made the Welsh look very average in that first half. Now in the back line, I mentioned the likes of Russell was really controlling the game, and we saw Ben White playing well at halfback as well, and of course he was getting that quick ball. And what Wales were doing is they were putting an extra man out in that defence trying to stop Scotland, and that was giving Scotland more time to be more effective at the breakdown. So in the first half it was all Scotland, and it just looked like they were going to run away with the... Now I don't know what Gregor Townsend would have been thinking when Wales went on this blitzkrieg in the second half of that 25 minutes. They just seemed to lose all sense of self-belief, Scotland. They changed their game plan. They gave the ball away a lot, and the Welsh team capitalised on that by scoring 4 quick consecutive tries. And it was only in the last 5 minutes again that Scotland really pulled their boots together again and got back into this game. And it was that man, Finn Russell, really that got the ball on a couple of occasions and made sure that it counted. And there was a situation, of course, at the very end of the game where we thought there was a try scored perhaps by Van der Merwe, but the ball was intentionally held up, and that was the end of the game. So Scotland got away with that one, 27 points to 26. Very much a game of two halves, and their performance in the first half would have pleased Gregor Townsend, no doubt about it, because they played very, very well. In the second half, it all went array for 25 minutes, and Wales got back into the game. So when they headed into their second game of this year's tournament against France, I'm sure Townsend was reminding them of how well they played in that first half and how they wanted to replicate that against France. Now in their second game, it was France at Murrayfield. I'm always loving watching games played at Murrayfield. It's a difficult place for any team to go. And of course, France were on the rebound after that hiding they'd received from Ireland the week before. So it's going to be interesting to see how they came and turned up, whether they did turn up at Murrayfield on that weekend. Well, it was Scotland again that got off to a great start in this game, and they proved that in both of their first two games in this year's competition that they were able to hit the ground running and actually put some points on the board. And once again, they went out to an early lead against France. They dominated more or less in that first half in the key areas, and once again, it was around that forward prowess that I thought they were doing very, very well. Now, there was a key point in this game, I thought, against France that Scotland didn't capitalise on, and it was when Antonio got sent off for France. He got a yellow card and got put in the bin, and I thought this was a great opportunity for Scotland to actually keep the scoreboard ticking over. They were ahead at 13 points to 3 at that stage, but it didn't happen, and that's when France started then to get some momentum in the game. Seems to be something going on with Scotland this year in second half of games. They just seem to not be able to put the opposition away, and at this level of rugby, particularly if they want to compete in that top tier of international rugby, they've got to be able to go the full 80 minutes, and they've got to keep the scoreboard ticking over. And we saw in the second half again them open the door for let's face it, a French team that wasn't playing very fantastic on the day, but they gave them a little bit of a sniff, and France have got enough brilliant players to be able to capitalise on that opportunity. So it was during that period of play that France came back into it. Bielri scored that magnificent solo try with a kick over the top, and Scotland had gone to sleep on the ball as far as I was concerned. They should have been ahead by 20 points to 3 at that point in the game in terms of the game swinging around and France getting back into it. Of course, we know now that France went on to win the game 20 points to 16, and if it wasn't for that drama at the end of the game, you all know what I'm talking about, the try, the no try, whatever it was. I said in my previous videos, and I stand by it, that Scotland had enough opportunities to put France away in that game, and they should have done so. And I think that period around when Antonio was off the field with the yellow card was a time where Scotland could have pounced, and if they'd scored some more points at that stage, they would have gone well ahead. Would have, could have, should have, but that's how I saw this particular game. They only scored 3 points in the second half, Scotland, and again, against this type of competition, whether it be in the Six Nations or any other international games, that is not going to be enough to win you big games of rugby. So they've got to work out how to go for the full 80 minutes. And I don't think any plans around trying to keep the players more conservative in the second half, whether that was the game plan against Wales or whether it was a game plan against France, it obviously didn't work, and I think Scotland has to come out and play their natural game. We saw it when they did it in the first half in Wales. They were very good, and they were controlling the game, I thought, very well at Murrayfield against France in the first half as well. So I really hope that we see that Scottish team come out and play this weekend, because I think they've got a much better chance of winning these rugby games when they play like that. No doubt about it that Finn Russell is huge for this Scottish team. He's the general, he's the guy that's pushing them around the field, and he showed his skill sets in both of those games, whether it be kicking 50-22s or kicking from the tee or setting up players with brilliant through the gap passes that he got Van der Merwe away as well. Van der Merwe, one of those guys that score tries from anywhere in the field, and I'd like to see Tuipulotu and Hugh Jones get more involved in the game for 80 minutes. This is where Scotland really have the opportunity, I think, to take it to some of these other teams. But we'll have to see how they go this weekend. They've got a very interesting encounter coming up. Okay, moving on, looking at the second place team so far in the Six Nations this year, and it's England. And of course, in their first game, they headed off to Rome, to the Olympic Stadia, to play against Italy. in their first game, and everybody thought this was going to be an opportunity for this new look England team to put some combinations together, give Italy a bit of a hiding, and to start looking like they're playing some more attractive rugby, because that's what they were telling us. Yes, Jamie George and Steve Borthwick spent a lot of time in front of the press before this year's Six Nations got underway, telling us that they were dying to play a more expansive game. They wanted it as part of their DNA, and were we going to see it in Rome? Well, Italy started off this game very, very well indeed, and under their new coach Gonzalo Quesada, we thought, well, this is going to be a new era of Italian rugby. England didn't look good in that first half in Rome, and it was Italy really at every opportunity they could were running the ball, whereas we saw a stop-start English team where they were dropping the ball, having some missed passes, and some of their kicking was a little bit suspect as well. So it was a bit of a surprise to see Italy go to half-time with the lead in Rome, but I did think that England were going to be able to come back and be a little bit stronger over the course of 80 minutes, and that's what we saw from England in that second half. They put enough combinations together, but what I thought really was going to win them that game was their defence, because we saw the Felix Jones defence strategy system coming into work as that game went on, and I thought England got better and better defensively in that game against Italy. The other thing that I thought kept England in that game against Italy was Henry Slade and George Ford's tactical kicking. I thought when they did take those opportunities, they gained territory, they put England back on the front foot, and they were able to snuff out a little bit of that Italian momentum that they were getting in the game. So as England were coming back in the second half, it was that tactical kicking that I thought was working on top of their more solid defence patterns that seemed to be getting better and better as the game went on. I guess that was a case of communication was improving. It was their first run together for the new season, so it was really interesting to see that evolution at that second half from the England backline. As that game went on, we saw a few other players that caught my eye that were starting to impress. They were Freddie Stewart at fullback, Elliot Daly on the wing, and Ethan Roots in the forward was having a big game, and he was starting to show what kind of dynamic he brings to that blindside flanker position for England this year. And it's pretty exciting, I think, what Ethan Roots has got to offer there. He really did show his physicality in the breakdown, and he started winning a lot of very important ball that was starting to get England back into this game. But as I said, Freddie Stewart was good under the high ball, but we saw him make a couple of really good runs as well. But it was also Tommy Freeman that was having a good game against Italy, and a new player for a lot of us to look at, and particularly obviously in the English colours, and he did very, very well. He got hungry looking for the ball. Always love a winger that gets in there looking for working opportunities, and he did a couple of really good breaks as well. So as England started to turn this game around, Tommy Freeman was very, very obvious. In the last 18 minutes of the game, we saw Chandler Cumming and South come on, and he played a bit of a cameo performance and also showed what England has in terms of their potential off the bench this year in the Six Nations. I was very, very impressed with him. And along with Ethan Roots, we see this new dynamic, athletic and very powerful players that England have in their back row to be able to bring on and to distribute the ball from the breakdown situation. Cunningham Smith also went on a couple of great breaking runs in that last 18 minutes, which showed him as a bit of a standout player on the field. So England got home in that first game this year, 27 points to 24 in the end. Italy scored a consolation try in the last seconds of the game to Ioane, but it was all over and said by then. But it wasn't a comprehensive win by England. But what I did see in that first game was a much improved second half, particularly, as I said, from a defensive point of view. And I was hoping by the time they went into their second game against Wales at Twickenham that England were going to come alive a little bit more in an attacking point of view, because I thought it took them that first game to get their defensive patterns right, and they showed enough in the forwards that they were going to get enough ball, particularly from the breakdown area. So I was pretty excited what was going to happen at Twickenham and whether England could really take the shackles off and show us what they had. Well, everyone arrived at Twickenham with great anticipation, and unfortunately we saw a fairly scrappy and dour affair indeed. And what was interesting were some of the things that were going on during that game. First of all, I thought Itoje and Chisholm were being outplayed by Jenkins and Beard, And that was an interesting one for me, because I thought those two guys were going to be able to dominate the Welsh pack and they were going to be able to get a lot of ball. But any ball that England got, it was disruptive, it was scrappy, and it was putting their backline under a bit of pressure. Wales weren't playing brilliantly well themselves, so it was a case of a game that was really in a typical Welsh-English fashion. It was a bit scrappy and the players were trying to find their footing. The refereeing didn't help in this occasion as well. We had a lot of stoppages and a lot of interruptions to the flow of the game. So it was a pretty difficult game to watch. There was quite a few drop passes from England in the first half. Dingwall was probably the standout back, another newbie for this English team. He got to score a try in this game as well. But Wales went to the half-time with the lead, which was the first time they'd done that in the history of the Six Nations between the two teams at Twickenham. And I thought Warren Gatland probably told his troops at half-time they had a great opportunity of coming away with a win, which they did against this poor-performing English team. In the second half, England improved enough to be able to scrape home and win this game by 20 points to 16. It wasn't one that's going to live in the annals of world rugby for very long, that's for sure. It's another one of those games where we go, well, England got a win. They've got themselves into position number 2 in the Six Nations now, but they didn't do it playing fantastic rugby. Again, they had some standout players that looked pretty good, but the likes of Ben Earl and some of the others had gone missing in action in this game. Another thing that rocked England a little bit in this game was their discipline. We had Chisholm get a yellow card, he went off, and we saw Ethan Roots get a yellow card and he went off as well. So when teams go down a man or two, they get put into that situation where they need to start covering for positions, and it does disrupt their play. It happened on this occasion for England. Now, the other thing that happened in this game that I found interesting, I thought the Welsh back trio was more dominant than England. I thought Raffle and Wainwright were winning the breakdowns over the English, which surprised me because we saw a much better performance by England in the second half against Italy the week before. That didn't transition over into this particular game. What I did see from England that was good was both Cole and Genge, when they came on off the bench, they did have an impact. So it shows the depth of this English squad is pretty good, and they started to gain some momentum for England when they came on, and that actually gave Wales a bit of a struggle. Freddie Stewart got better as the game went on. He got a couple of high balls and was very secure at the back. Wales were trying to pepper him with a couple of high kicks. That didn't work, and England were able to come back up the forward in an offensive position from Freddie Stewart collecting those balls. So after this game, I'd put this one down to the defence winning this game for England. I thought that Wales had a couple of opportunities to get through. The English defence was too good. And again, they're probably riding on the success of their defence so far in this year's competition without showing us too much at all on what these backs are able to do. It's incredibly frustrating, isn't it? You've got the likes of Slade and Daly and Stewart and these guys in the back line. Their names look fantastic on paper, but when they actually get out on the field and we start seeing them getting ball in hand, they're not living up to expectation for whatever reason. That's what I think as well. But I'm interested in your comments. Is this English backline setting your hearts on fire, or are you seeing them rather disappointing as well? And what do you put it down to? Do you put it down to the service of the forwards, or do you think it's just their new combinations needing time to come together? A lot of you have said, well, their best players are not playing in this team at the moment, and we're going to see some changes in the selection for England as we move forward in this competition. That will be interesting to see. Okay, so wrapping up England so far in the tournament, even though they're in second place, I think they've been disappointing to the potential that they have in this team. Let's see how they go again this week. They're up against Scotland at Murrayfield. Going to be a very interesting encounter. If Scotland can get off to an early start, who knows what could happen. They might be able to stick it this time, or they might get run down again by England. I'm going to do a full preview of that game once the teams are announced later this week, and give you my opinion on what way it's going to go. I think Steve Borthwick's going to be looking for England to keep building momentum game by game. I think he's been saying that he's been okay with what he's seen so far. The defensive patterns are coming together. They have won those 2 games, so that's something that he'll be very, very pleased about. But I think he'll be looking for an improved performance, a performance that's a little bit more in line with a team that's dominating their opposition rather than just scraping across the line for a win. We'll have to wait and see what happens in Murrayfield this weekend. Okay, let's get on to Ireland now and talking about them. They're running away so far with the Six Nations competition at the moment. They're in number 1 position. They're on 10 points. And they are going to be playing against Wales this weekend in Dublin, and that's going to be a very interesting encounter indeed. But we got to the start of this year's competition, and the Irish team travelled down to Marseille in the south of France, and we were all looking forward to that one because we felt that the winner of this game could probably go on and win the Six Nations competition this year. Ireland were coming off that disappointment of a quarter-final loss to the All Blacks in the Rugby World Cup, and France were coming off their loss in the quarterfinals as well against South Africa. So it was going to be really interesting to see how these two teams bounce back. France, home ground advantage, and a lot of expectation on this French team without Antoine Dupont. They seem to have a lot of great players, which I believe they have in this team. But it was going to be interesting to see how Fabien Galthié had brought this team together for this first game against Ireland. Well, as we got underway in Marseille, it didn't take long to see that it was going to be Ireland all the way. They started dominating this game early on. A special look into the 3 relatively newbies coming into this team for Ireland, and we're talking about Jack Crowley, of course. We're talking about Joe McCarthy, and we're talking about Calvin Nash. All of them played pretty well in that first game. McCarthy was a standout for me. He's an absolutely brilliant player, and he really took it to this French team, and I think that's where Ireland really started to dominate this French team. It was up to those 3 to cement themselves into this team, and I think they did pretty well in that first game to do so. And we looked on the old stalwarts to be doing the great things as well. Hugo Keenan was good without being fantastic in this first game, but Bundee Aki was showing his normal brilliant self, not only just busting through the line, but also the soft hands and giving some good passes to his fellow colleagues to get away as well. In the forwards, I thought the Irish were doing pretty well, except for the front row. I saw them being out-muscled a little bit here, and we saw Porter get a really bad knock from Willemse at one stage, of which Willemse ended up spending the rest of the game off the field after he got 2 yellow cards in this particular game. And whether or not that impacted Porter a little bit, I thought that that's where the Irish weakness may be in this particular team. And before they get to South Africa in the beginning of July, I'm sure that Andy Farrell's going to do a little bit more work on this Irish front row to make sure that they can take on one of the best packs in the world. But hey, let's not take away anything from this first game. 38 points to 17 it was in the end. A dominant display by Ireland across the pitch, and it was a real masterclass against France. And France were really demoralised after this game. You could see it. A number of their players had their heads down, and I'm sure Fabien Galthié would have been scratching his head on what he was going to do to try and pick France up out of this hole. But it looked good for Ireland. They started off their campaign strong, and I'm sure Andy Farrell would have been really happy with this performance against France, because with a game like that, beating the other team that was suspected to be your big foes in this year's competition. One of the things that Ireland were really good at in that first game against France was their kicking options that they have. Jack Crowley and also James Lowe. Lowe's really good when he gets the ball inside his own 22 and does a very long strategical kicking for Ireland. It always gains them a lot of territory and puts their forwards back on the front foot. In Crowley's case, he was doing some good kicks at times during general play, and again, that was giving Ireland the momentum going forward. So there were a lot of good things in this game from Ireland. I was looking forward to their second game in this year's competition against Italy, because I thought that was going to give their players an opportunity to be a little bit more freer, throw the ball around a little bit more, and really unleash themselves on that Italian team. Another standout for me in that game against France was Caelan Doris. I thought he had a really exceptional game. He was very mobile around the field as well, did a couple of good breaks himself. So overall, it was just a really good performance by Ireland. They started off the tournament really well, and they sent out the warning signs to every other team in this competition. If you're going to beat us, you're going to have to play some extraordinary good rugby, because that's what Ireland's playing at this level. Now, I'm sure after the Italian team had watched that game between Ireland and France, they were a little bit nervous going to Dublin, of all places, to play against Ireland at the Aviva Stadium. And it didn't take long for us to get into that game to see what was going to happen. Italy had a couple of moments in the first few minutes where they threw the ball around, but it was really like Ireland were warming up for a training session once they got into this game, and they were just dominant and ruthless throughout this second game. Now, there were a couple of really standout points in the second game for me. It was the power and the precision of the Irish throughout this game. They hardly made any mistakes or gave the ball away to Italy. And I think the fact that they kept Italy scoreless throughout this entire game was a testament to their defence, and also the amount of territory they were getting and putting pressure on the Italians. They were playing most of the game in the Italian half, and when they were back in the Irish half, they made great line breaks and got themselves out of danger. And I remember one particular run by Hugo Keenan in this game where he played a lot better than I think he did in the first game. He took off downfield and beat 3 or 4 different Italian players before passing the ball on. You could tell Ireland were enjoying this game. There was a lot of banter between the players on the field, and when a team's playing this well, how can you not enjoy your rugby? So they really put the sword to Italy in this game. They were ruthless. I said that in my review, and it showed the gap between the Italians and the Irish in the Six Nations competition this year. A little bit sad for Italy, because after that first game against England, I thought they had a little bit of an opportunity at least to score a few points, but they had no answer to Ireland in this game in Dublin. It's a try blitzkrieg from Ireland against Italy. As I said, 36 points to 0. They went straight to the top of the ladder this year in the Six Nations after 2 games. And who's going to bet on Ireland losing a game this year in the Six Nations? I'm certainly not. And they're going to be hosting Wales this weekend at the Aviva Stadium. A daunting task for Wales to come to the Aviva Stadium, both with the way that Ireland's playing at the moment and also the way that Wales is playing at the moment. There could be a lot of points scored in this game against the team in red. So after 2 games in this year's competition of the Six Nations, we're seeing Ireland being the dominant force. They've kicked on from the Rugby World Cup disappointment last year, and that rebuilding phase they're going into with a couple of positions there, their team certainly seems to be working out. Jack Crowley's getting better by the game, and as I said in my other game review against Italy, I just thought that the more games he gets, the more experience he has with these players around him, he's going to turn into a very, very good number 10. Not saying that he's not already, but he can get even better, I'm sure, with a bit more experience. But what really excites me is the opportunity that Ireland have in the back line. We've seen in the games McCloskey coming in and playing as well. He was very interesting. We've seen Henshaw. We've seen Bundy Archie playing his best. Andy Farrell's only problem with this Irish team is who is he going to select to put in the team, because he's got so many players playing really, really well. As I said in a number of videos so far this year, I'm really excited about what lays ahead with this Irish team with their tour to South Africa. They've got 2 test matches there against South Africa this year. I think that's going to be really the making of this Irish team. If they can go there and get 1 or 2 wins in South Africa, then that's going to be a huge statement in this year's rugby competition. But let's keep focused on the Six Nations. I think Ireland are going to continue to dominate this year's Six Nations. They've got too much power in the forwards. They've got too much mobility. Josh van der Fleer, Caelan Doris. So really exciting about this Irish team this year is a lot of positions are up for grabs, and it's going to be a difficult task week in, week out for Andy Farrell to choose who he actually wants to put in this team. But what a nice problem to have. I thought Beelan played really well coming on and playing as a part of the starting lineup this last week. He played really, really well. And I think Baird also played extremely well, and he must be pushing Peter O'Mahony for a full-time start in that game. We've got players playing at that level and that much competition within the team, then it's a really, really good thing. So don't forget to watch my preview video this week later on once the teams have been announced for this weekend's clash between Ireland and Wales to be played at the Aviva Stadium. I suspect Ireland are going to continue on with their winning ways this weekend, but I'll talk about that more in detail. So far in this competition, they've looked unbeatable. They're only getting better. So it's going to be a tough time for Wales in Dublin this weekend. So there you go. There's my recap of the Six Nations in 2024 thus far after round 2 of the competition. I've now been through all of the teams' performances as I see them. I would love to hear your comments today on what you think of Scotland, England and Ireland and how they've been performing. What do you think is going to happen this weekend? Drop me your notes on that as well with those respective games, but make sure you come back for my preview videos as we head into the weekend. So Ireland dominating the Six Nations at the top of the league. We'll have to wait and see what happens with England and Scotland this weekend. That's going to be a very interesting encounter at Murrayfield. We've got number 2 and number 3 playing against each other, and it'll be good to see whether those other teams, France and Italy, are also able to bounce back a little bit and put a win on the board. We'll have to wait and see this weekend. Okay, well that's it for this particular video. Thank you very much for watching my content. I look forward to welcoming you back again here on Inside Rugby in the not too distant future. Until then, it's time to say adios from beautiful Mexico. Stay well, stay safe everyone, and I'll see you all again very soon. Bye for now.